Hello, good morning. It's Books at Lunchtime again with me, Em, and Tracy in the shop. And today we're extremely happy and delighted to welcome Sophie Hannah along to the conversation. So good morning, Sophie. How are you?
I'm great, thanks. Great to be here.
We're very pleased that you're joining us today because it's a really special day for you because your book's out.
It is. It's paperback publication day.
Paperback, yes. So congratulations.
Thank you.
And I see this morning on the Twitter sphere as well that it's also just been picked as a Richard and Judy book club book.
It has. So, that was just announced today. I've known about it for a while, and I've had to keep it a big secret until it was officially revealed.
So tell us about it, Sophie, please, because I finished it last night. Luckily, before I had to go to sleep. So it's one that I think is going to come back to haunt me when it's dark. But I really enjoyed it, and I've got lots of questions for you actually about the various ways you write and the different things you write. But first of all, can you give us a bit of background about what the book is about?
Yes, so it starts when Beth, who is the heroine, I can hear like some background noise. Is that, can you hear that?
It might be the shop. It might be the shop. I think. Yeah.
Okay, right, I'll just carry on.
Tracy's muted.
Okay. So Beth is the heroine of Haven't They Grown? And the story starts when she cannot resist going and having a nosy at the new house of her former best friend. So 12 years ago, Beth and her best friend Flora, their friendship ended very suddenly. And they haven't been in touch since. And the reader doesn't know why, but they just know that Beth and Flora had this kind of rift 12 years ago. Anyway, Beth is driving her son to an away football game, and she knows that Flora's new slightly mansion-like house is very near the football ground, so she can't resist going and having a look. And while she's there, sort of effectively spying on Flora's house, a car pulls up and goes through the gateposts and parks in the driveway, and Flora gets out of the car, and Beth thinks, oh, there's Flora, and notices obviously that she looks the same but a bit older. And then Flora opens the back door of the car, and Beth hears her say, come on, Thomas, come on, Emily, out you get. And Beth thinks to herself, why is she talking to them as though they are still 5 and 3 years old, the way they were when I last saw them? And then one by one, what seems to be 5-year-old Thomas and 3-year-old Emily step out of the car. And they, Beth has heard Flora call them Thomas and Emily, and yet they do not look a day older than they were when Beth last saw them 12 years ago. They're no taller, they are little children, and they're even wearing the exact outfits that Beth remembers them wearing aged 3 and 5 when she last knew them. So Beth knows this is impossible, and yet she also knows that she is genuinely really seeing 5-year-old Thomas and 3-year-old Emily. Why haven't they grown? That's why it's called Haven't They Grown, in case you hadn't already worked it out.
Haven't they grown? Yes, exactly.
Why haven't they grown?
And it's a real twisty, turny, suspenseful, I didn't see that coming, oh my gosh, what's going to happen next kind of a book. And actually, it was a real treat for me, Sophie, reading this, because I haven't read a book like this for a really long time. And I was actually sitting literally where I am now when I started reading it, and I don't think I moved from my chair. So certainly for the first few chapters, I was sitting there acutely aware I should be doing something else, and was reading. What is it about the suspenseful, twisty plot that really appeals to you as a writer? Because this kind of goes through some of your other work too.
Yeah, well, suspenseful is kind of the main thing. The books I most love as a reader are the ones that just keep me riveted, and I just have to turn the pages until I find out what's going on. That's why I love Agatha Christie. She's brilliant at doing that. And all my favourite novels, not all, but a lot of my favourite novels do that. So the suspense and the desire to find out the solution to the mystery is really key. It's interesting that lots of people describe Haven't They Grown as twisty. And I mean, there is like a big twist, I guess, but I actually see it as a relatively straightforward thriller in the sense that once Beth thinks, I have to find out the truth, I have to know what's going on here, she starts investigating. And no matter what discouragement she meets with from people saying, no, no, this is so weird, you should just steer well clear of it, she is determined to pursue it and find out what's going on. And as she pursues her investigation, she finds out more and more and more. And what she finds out is kind of surprising and shocking, but it's not as though each new discovery undermines the last one. She's building up a picture, and every new detail, although some of the details are inexplicable at first, actually, when you find out what's going on at the end, you can look back and see that every new detail she finds out is just another part of what turns out to be the true picture. So I actually think of it as quite straightforward. There is a big twist towards the end, but really it's just her finding out piece by piece about the truth of this very, very unusual and shocking scenario. And like, I think it's interesting that people think of it as twisty, because I think what that shows to me is that we kind of all wrongly assume that other people's lives and what other people are getting up to is going to be kind of normal. But I don't believe that. I think a lot of what people get up to is really, really not normal and dysfunctional. Or rather, I think dysfunctional is much more normal and common than we most of us think. And so it feels twisty, but the real twist, the real twist effect comes from the fact that we don't expect people to behave like some of the people in Haven't They Grown do, but in fact, real people do behave in those ways. And so that's what I think gives the sense of twist.
That's a really interesting distinction. And now you said that's absolutely right. Like it is those expectations you have on the characters and what they do and what they don't do. One thing you said there, Sophie, is it really interested me though, is it's the way that you've been leaving sort of breadcrumbs through the book, so that if you were to look back on it, you might be able to see with the benefit of hindsight how it all kind of meshes together a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of my books have that sort of element. So I start with a mystery that hopefully will hook the reader, and that intrigues me. That's how I know it's a good enough mystery. And at first, the reader doesn't know what on earth could be going on because they only see one piece. So in Haven't They Grown, the reader in the first chapter sees these two children who apparently, although they're Thomas and Emily, their mum calls them Thomas and Emily, they appear not to have grown, and yet we know this is impossible. So that's piece one, and nothing makes sense because it's the only piece we've got. And so the structure of Haven't They Grown is really simple. Beth just goes on and on and on, gathering more pieces. And, you know, this is another thing I love about Agatha Christie and all the thriller writers that I love, is that until you get really close to it all coming together in a complete picture, it can actually have the effect that as you discover the new pieces, the picture looks even more impossible until that. I mean, it's different to a jigsaw, right? If you imagine doing a jigsaw puzzle, every piece that you slot in, assuming you slot it into its right place, makes the picture start to look a bit more complete. But with a mystery puzzle-based crime novel, things start to look more and more and more mysterious with every element that comes in until you bring in that one piece that everything else can fit into neatly. And then you go, oh, that's the picture.
Talk to us about Poirot, because the other one, I know that some of our readers in the shop have discovered you via the Poirot series, because you are, oh, Tracy's got some too as well. So you have been given this incredible honour of resurrecting Monsieur Poirot and bringing him back to life. How did that come about?
Well, first of all, I should say that I didn't resurrect him in the sense that he hasn't come back from the dead. Agatha killed him in the
yes,
person. And I certainly didn't want to like quibble about that. So I've just set my Poirot novels at an earlier period in his timeline when he's still alive. How it came about was that my literary agent, who is wonderful and talented and a complete sort of maverick, he just had the idea. He was in a meeting at HarperCollins and he suggested it without running it past me. He was just in this meeting room at HarperCollins about something completely different they were talking about. And he was sitting next to some shelves with Agatha Christie novels in them. And he just had the idea. And he said to the editor, why don't you get my author, Sophie Hannah, to write new Poirot novels? She's a big Agatha fan. And he was told, no way, the Christie family would not want that. But it turned out that at that exact moment in time, the Christie family were wanting exactly that to happen, but hadn't yet told HarperCollins. But they did tell HarperCollins the very next day, literally the next day, at which point the editor said, this is a weird coincidence. I had an agent in my office yesterday who thinks he might have the perfect author for this. And it all went from there.
When you're writing Poirot, are you very conscious of Christie when you're coming up with plots and you're coming up with the way the stories kind of unravel? Or do you have your own particular take on how you construct the mysteries?
I mean, I don't think there's a second of my life when I'm not very aware of Christie. I just go through life being very aware of Agatha Christie. In terms of how I construct the books, I think it's a mixture of the sort of Christie vibe and the me vibe, but it's more complicated than that because Agatha Christie was the first mystery novelist that I read and loved. And she really formed the blueprint in my mind for what a mystery novel should be and do. So even the part that's me is influenced by Agatha Christie.
That's so great. I mean, I also grew up just, that was my introduction to crime writing as it was. And it's very much a go-to for me, particularly at this time of year. I don't know what it is about Christmas that makes people want to read Christie novels. Maybe it's that there's always an adaptation on the television, isn't it?
Yeah.
Which one, if you're a reader who wants to get back into this, which one of your Christies would you recommend people start with?
Oh,
your Poirots. Let's call them Poirots because you need them.
Yeah. You know, I find it almost impossible to say. I mean, I have a very soft spot for the second one, Closed Casket, because that one I think contains just the best motive for murder that I have ever thought of. It's just, when I thought of the motive that the murderer would have, I just thought this is so amazing and no one will ever get it. So I guess I might recommend that one. But lots of people like to start a series at the beginning. So for those people, they should obviously start with the Monogram murders and read them in order. And there's also an argument for starting with the latest one, which is called The Killings at Kingfisher Hill, because that in many ways is my very favourite. That book, the whole idea for it and every element of it just landed in my head as if by magic. And I honestly felt as though, you know, God had come down and given me a sort of complete, amazing book idea. So that's probably my favourite one. So just don't start with number 3, which is The Mystery of Three Quarters, even though because people write to me all the time once they've read my Poirot novels and my other novels, and The Mystery of Three Quarters seems to be the one that most people like best. So
that's the one I've read.
Yeah. So I don't know.
And I have started.
Anywhere is probably the conclusion of that.
And I'm conscious of time, so I have read Three Quarters and hugely enjoyed it. I thought you channeled her voice so well. I was a bit skeptical, but gosh, haven't you done well on that? I'm enjoying Kingfisher Hill at the moment, but you not only write sort of the suspenseful modern novel and the Poirot books, you write self-help, you write poetry, you write everything, don't you?
Not quite everything.
Well,
I haven't written poetry for a while, but I guess I do still write it sometimes. And I write self-help. I've written a book called How to Hold a Grudge, which is all about how holding grudges in the right way actually makes us more enlightened and more forgiving, and is generally good for the world. And I've written a book published, in fact, it's my most recent book, which is called Happiness, a Mystery, and 66 attempts to solve it. And in that book, I set out to solve the mystery of happiness and help people to, you know, decide how to bring more of it into their lives.
It's fascinating how you are able to cover so much ground and do it all quite just so well. And we normally ask our authors at this point, if someone has read all of your books, what would they go on to read? What would you recommend? But actually, I think you've written so much that you could keep someone busy for quite a long while, couldn't you?
Well, I mean, I can tell you who my favourite authors are. Obviously, Agatha Christie's one of them. I also love the complete works of Ruth Rendell, both as Ruth Rendell and as Barbara Vine. My favourite living crime writer is probably Tana French, who is absolutely brilliant. And my favourite of hers is Broken Harbour, which is just an amazingly gripping crime novel set in a Dublin sort of ghost estate. So that it was this sort of affluent, aspirational designer housing estate that was being built, and then the economy crashed. And so no one moved into the estate apart from like one family, and then they get murdered. And it's just really gripping and brilliant.
Well, that's given us plenty of ideas of things to read this season. I know so many people buy books now for gifts, but I think at about in a couple of days' time, they'll have finished off their Christmas shopping and they'll be looking for something to read for themselves. And that's very much been on our minds. What am I going to read just to enjoy? And I would hugely recommend these books just for pleasure. We've really enjoyed them. So thank you so much for writing them.
Thank you.
It's been lovely chatting with you. Thank you very much for your time.
Great to chat to you. Yeah, and have a great Christmas.
Yes.
You too.
You too, Sophie. Thank you again.
Okay.
Take care. Thank you. Bye. Bye.